I would like to introduce my long-suffering friend, Dr. Sommer. Dr. Sommer, we've been doing strange things together, and Dr. Sommer has been working in the secret police archives, Soviet secret police, but his area is the anti-Polish operation of the NKVD, in particular in the 1930s. And he will tell us about his latest adventures. Extremely interesting, at least for me.
Cities in Poland, and everyone has a different system of presentation, so there is also some kind of problem. And what I'm going to show today is a collection of documents which I quite recently found in secret police archive in Kiev. Quite recently, it means that last time I was in Kiev in March. I'll start from describing how it came that my archival query in Ukraine began. While writing a monograph on the anti-Polish operation, I often used the blog Dziadia Vania. It means Uncle Jack. Under this pseudonym hides a descendant of the victim of so-called Harbin operation. Harbin operation was one of the mass operations of Great Terror. During this operation, there were about 80,500 people from the Harbin, Chinese city Harbin, killed. He leads his own almost personal struggle with FSB, Russian secret police, for the disclosure of secrets of that Harbin operation. By the way, he reveals also the documents interesting to me concerning the anti-Polish operation. And when I was checking his page in August 2013, I noticed that once again he was denied access to justification of the order by which the Harbin operation was launched, and that this decision was upheld by the Moscow court. Dziadia Vania, this Uncle Jack, wrote that he will appeal this decision. When I checked his page a few days later, I noticed an astonishing information. Someone who apparently also was a keen reader of Uncle Jack writings sent in a link to Dropbox. You know what is Dropbox? Where he placed documents sought by Uncle Jack, which has been denied to him by Moscow court. The message with a link contained the name of the sender, Pavel Kulik. I checked out right away who it was using Facebook, and what was my surprise when it turned out that this was the new director of the archives of the SBU, secret police, in Ukraine, in Kiev. I thought to myself, if he revealed such a document and sent it to Dropbox, through Dropbox, he might also reveal some interesting documents for me concerning anti-Polish operation. I wrote to him and asked if I can come. I got permission, and so began my adventure with the Ukrainian archives and Ukrainian secret police. So why, after having had written 3 books on the anti-Polish operation, I decided to pursue the topic further? This last of my books, this is the monograph of Polish operation. I have a few copies with myself. The answer is simple. Some of the problems associated with it are still unclear. The number 1 problem was the lack of the original order 00485, which sanctioned anti-Polish operation. Coming to Kiev for the first time, I hoped that this key document could be found. On the spot, it turned out that it actually is present in SBU archive and in 2 versions. A year ago at a press conference in Warsaw, I presented this discovery. I made it available in Wikipedia and allowed to reach this document to anyone interested. And this is the document, 2 copies, one from Kiev and one from Kharkiv, in Polish Kharków. This is the cover. This is how the documents are stored. And this is the order 008 485, basing on which almost 200,000 Polish people were killed in years 1937 and 1938. This is the version from Kharkiv. Here we have Kharkov. It means disclassified. And they have this document, this first document, in the form of Xero copy. And this is the second version. It's from Kiev. Version from Kiev was original, and it looks like that. So before I presented it in Warsaw last year, it wasn't known to the science. Another nagging problem was the question of how the so-called Polish military organization, Polska Organizacja Wojskowa, according to Soviets, the main risk factor for the Soviet system in the 30s, emerged. I knew that the first alleged commander of the Polish military organization was Bolesław Skarbek-Szacki, zealous communist arrested in August 15, 1933. In the course of the investigation, he confessed to being the head of the Polish military organization and pointed to a number of his colleagues who allegedly were his collaborators in this big plot. He was murdered in March 1934. Of course, his testimony was the product of NKVD. However, even the NKVD had to somehow get the idea that it is the Skarbek who leads Polish anti-Soviet conspiracy, not someone else. In the archives of the SBU, I learned that his files are in the state archives in Chernihiv. I arrived there in March, and I found a solution to this puzzle. Skarbek, who was appointed as a head of Polish military organization, was appointed as the head of the Polish military organization by the Deputy Minister of Agriculture of Soviet Union, Konar Poleszczuk, who in January 1933 was tried in Moscow for causing the Great Famine. During the judicial procedure, he admitted his role in causing Great Famine and explained that he has performed his bad deeds with the help of Polish nationalists from Polish military organization whose leader was Skarbek. Why exactly the eager communist Skarbek was accused by him of such a notorious crime? The explanation is simple. He was the most famous communist from Kiev, known by Konar. Testimony of Konar had immense influence on the history of anti-Polish operations because he was a personal friend of Nikolai Jeżov, later head of the NKVD, with whom he drank a lot of vodka. That is why Jeżov particularly harshly treated the Poles to get away from the memories of this knowledge, and yet Stalin has periodically berated him about it. Konar was to be the main defendant during planned open process of perpetrators of the Holodomor trial. Ultimately, however, the trial didn't take place, because the Kremlin did not want to reveal the enormous extent of the famine. He was therefore executed with a group of colleagues by the decision of Collegium of OGPU, the former form of NKVD, at the beginning of the 1933, and a few months later the Skarbek was arrested. And now I show two documents with testimony of Konar. This is document sent to Kiev, in which there is a testimony that according to Konar, the Skarbek is the leader of Polish military organization. And the second document, this is the fragment from the listening of Konar, and he also, for the second time, is saying that Skarbek is a chief of POW, Polska Organizacja Wojskowa, Polish military organization. Places that were strictly watched by the Soviet in the 30s, in particular, were the Polish diplomatic missions. Accounts by Polish diplomats show their horrible treatment by the Soviet. For example, Consul in Kiev, Jan Karszo-Siedlewski, who after World War II worked at the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., and died in Washington in 1956, had wrote notes for the Polish foreign ministry about this sad situation. What was not known, however, was the Soviet record of this special care. It turned out that survived almost complete records regarding the surveillance of the Polish consulate in Kiev. The facility was under strict surveillance all day since 1933. Secret police recorded all the guests from there on. Since 1934, every visitor became a figurehead. Since the middle of
Target for investigation. That's a direct translation from the Russian. It doesn't translate into the English. Target for investigation. Since not a figurehead. Figurehead is just somebody unimportant.
Since the middle of 1936, all the guests were arrested. As of the beginning of 1937, because of fear for his life, no one came to the Polish consulate anymore. The list of visitors, carefully compiled since 1933, were used to capture the Poles during the anti-Polish operation. Among those who were on those lists, only few survived. And I have some photographs from this surveillance. This is the entrance to Polish consulate in the winter, as you see. All the visitors were photographed, and here is a Polish eagle. There are some remarks, operational. If there was something interesting for the police agent, they were making some notes. This is another person, also in the winter. This is woman photographed outside the building with some remarks concerning her behavior. This is also in the winter. This is in bad position, so every person which was photographed was also described and had a special pseudonym. This is the woman in the summer. Another man, and her description, his description. So everyone was strictly described. There are a few thousand of such photographs in this archive.
So you could have a wall of victims, huh?
But first it should be matched with the list of execution. There is an urgent need to create a list of victims of the anti-Polish operation. Approximately 40% of victims, almost 80,000 Poles, were executed in the Ukraine. In the archives of the SBU, I found a big set of those lists. Thanks to them, I can now almost with full precision show how this genocide was technically carried out. In the documents, there is also detailed information about the places of burial. And I show some of the lists. I don't have a list. Some of the documents are not in here. Sorry for a technical problem. I just. Yes, there were in here.
Can you find them here?
Mm-hmm.
Will survive. Only I get it.
No. Please, sorry for a moment, but I must find this document. I don't put these documents.
No.
Okay, sorry. I don't have these documents on this. So I don't have the pictures for this list problem, but actually there are 1,000 of lists, and it looks like that the list of Poles who were doomed to shooting were prepared by the so-called dwojka. The dwojka consisted of Nikolaj Jeżow and Andrzej Wyszyński. They were on daily basis preparing those lists, and after that those lists were sent to the cities, to the local NKVD, and NKVD, according to those lists, were organized the executions. There were very carefully prepared execution squads who were making their bloody task almost every free day in almost every bigger Soviet city. After making the execution, special protocol was prepared, and this protocol was sent back to Moscow. So we have two lists with every person. First is this order from Moscow, and the second is the protocol of execution with the same name. And it was checked in Moscow if everything was all right. The question of this group of people was completed, and almost every list with about 80,000 names is in SBU archive in Ukraine. Above mentioned Skarbek, who was the leader of the POW, Polish Military Organization, of course should have some kind of group of collaborators. In reality, there was not POW in Ukraine at all. So they, in OGPU, they decided to found some people for his as his subordinates, and they decided that the best suiting part of the people would be Polish teachers, which were on the trial in 1928. I found a lot of pictures of these teachers. In 1928, most of them, during the process, they were acquitted and freed. But in 1933, some of them were put to jail or to Gulag. In 1937, most of them were killed. And this is Barbara Majewska. She was the teacher from Odessa school and one of the main collaborators of Skarbek in this construction.
False construction. False construction.
False construction. This is Maria Galińska. She was the only teacher from this group who survived 1937, and she was rehabilitated in 1956.
How many teachers were arrested?
About 60 persons. This is the group of Polish teachers. You see the Polish words on the wall.
Latin alphabet.
To the future full of light. Yes. Some of these people were put into big process. I found about 70 files, 70 volumes of files concerning this process, and every particular person was described, all biography and all the deeds and all the accusations. This is the group of teachers from the Szepetówka. I think that 3 or 4 from them were put on this trial. And this is the guy, his name is Nagorny. He was the chief of the prison, NKVD prison in Kiev, and he was one of the main executioners of Poles. He was present, I think, during 19% of the executions. After the Great Terror, he was not put into the court. He was dead during the Second World War, and I found this picture also, and I think it was never, this face was never published before. So far, in the course of 5 visits to Ukraine, I went through tens of thousands of pages of documents and copied approximately 10,000 pages. However, only the archive of the SBU contains almost 400,000 files with an average size of 25 pages each. So to review, there is 250 pages each. So to review, there is about 10 million pages, not counting additional regional archives. What is needed now is archaeography, the mining of those resources. I'm convinced that after reading this enormous material, the history of Great Terror requires to be written again. Of course, a lot of historians should work on this. What I want to do alone is to read through as much of material relating to the anti-Polish operation as I can before the Ukrainian archives close, which is an imminent threat as long as political situation in Ukraine is so instabilized. In Russia and countries like Ukraine, there is from time to time a period of relative freedom, and after Maidan we have this period of relative freedom. That's why this material was declassified. But after this period, after a few years, everything is closed again, and I think that this is the prospects before those archives also. So this is what I was planning to present today. Please, if you have a question.
Dr. Sommer's PhD is from the Polish Academy of Sciences Institute of Sociology. He has been with us with the Institute of World Politics Kosciuszko chair for a long time, where his krisha, protection, so he wouldn't get killed. I'm not joking either. This is not a joke. The documents he's referring to are available from Vladivostok to Tajikistan. All of this is private effort. Liberal and leftist Poland doesn't care. It has not assisted us in any manner. This is all through fundraising efforts here in the United States that he can do stuff and his own money. This is really incredible. You have no idea how hard it is to find anything and retrieve it. It's been at it for now, what, 10 years?
8.
8, sorry. It's always very precise.
Not quite long.
Okay, so we'll take a couple of questions.
One quick question. You mentioned dwójka. Could you
define what dwójka means, what it was.
Dwojka.
Dwójka, what is
It was a special commission constructed for the anti-Polish operation. The commission consisted of Nikolai Jeżow and Andrzej Wyszyński.
And it was a Polish?
No, no, no.
No, it was dwojka. Then
It's not
it
the
sounds
second
like
bureau
dwójka.
of the
Yes,
intelligence
no.
Of Polish military intelligence. It's dwojka, as in dwojka ili trojka. Trojka is the three of the NKVD. No, no,
No, no,
it's
no,
not
no,
the
no.
intelligence,
It's
Polish
not Polish intelligence.
It's called the duo. As in, you see, one needs to differentiate between the administrative way and the judicial way. When the Soviets realized that the story of the Great Famine, the terror famine, would come out, they decided to scrap all the show trials, and the administrative way kicked in, and they started shooting people surreptitiously, not after a trial, just after administrative proceedings.
Administrative decision,
Yeah,
actually.
decision, right.
Mhm.
Proceedings.
So dwójka and dwójka, that's...
They are
No,
two
no, no.
quite different things.
Because dwójka, you know, it's something different.
Yes, of
Yes,
course.
yes.
Mhm. But dwojka, not dwójka, dwojka.
And what
Instead of
dwójka?
trojka.
What dwójka?
Because there were two people.
Two people
Jeżow and
decided.
What
Wyszyński.
good dwójka? What was it? That was
The second bureau of
counterintelligence, right? Dwójka.
Yes.
Second bureau of the general staff. That comes from the French. The French had the same
And
thing. The
it
Poles
was
copied it
against
after
the
1918.
Soviets then.
It was against the Nazis too. It was against.
Right.
It was just military intelligence.
Okay.
Yes.
Because I
Mhm.
got it confused.
No,
I was
no, no.
surprised when you said what.
No, that's just.
No.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. Yes.
At that stage, Jeżow and Wyszyński were both members of the Politburo?
No,
The
no.
Central Committee, they were very high ranking.
Wyszyński was a general
Prosecutor.
prosecutor general, and Jeżow was the commissioner of
Commissar.
commissar.
For internal affairs.
Yes.
He's the head of the secret police.
And it's a
Mhm.
very
They
high
weren't in
ranking
the
in the
Politburo.
central government.
Yes. And now we can analyze those lists. And for example, we know that Wyszyński put his signature on every list, and Jeżow on 80% of the list. On some lists, but very few, there is a signature of Beria, and on some also the deputy of Jeżow Frinowski. So there are generally 4 persons, but they were
And that's
acting
80,000
into-
names.
in Ukraine,
Yes,
In
yes,
Ukraine,
I'm
yes.
certainly, yes.
more or less.
I just want to know, was the embassy where the pictures
The
were
consulate.
Consulate in Kiev,
taken? In Kiev?
yes.
Okay.
Because the Kiev, there was an agreement between Poland and Soviet Union, according to which we had embassy and also 4 consulate, one in Leningrad, one in Kharkiv, one in Kiev, and one in Gruzja to
Georgia.
Georgia, jak się nazywa to miasto? Tripolis. Tbilisi.
There was also a downgrading of the Polish diplomatic mission, remember? It was not a full embassy. It was called poselstwo, not
Yes,
ambassador.
it was envoy, not ambassador.
Envoy, not ambassador. So that would be no precedent for the Polish diplomats. That's what Lenin decided.
But this consulate was used to prepare those lists which were used during the anti-Polish operation. They just were looking for the people from the lists. And now those lists are copied, so we have those lists also.
One more follow-up. What was the motive of the anti-Polish operation? I mean, why?
Stalin said, kill the Poles. They
That's
were
it.
the enemy nation.
Okay.
They
I
were
know it
the
sounds
lords. It's in a way, it's deeply psychological. The Poles trounced the Soviets and thwarted their expansion into Western Europe. So there was a big chip on the shoulder. Second of all, the Poles, I write about it in my intermarium, had the only alternative to the Soviet Union called the Intermarium, then the legacy of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth was so attractive, and then the communists couldn't stand it. So they targeted the Poles. Among the people who were killed as Poles, there were also Jews and others. They were on the list too. Whoever was infected with Polishness, the Soviets got him. There is a famous story which Tomek unearthed, where when they were running out of Poles in Moscow, what was it, Beria? No, Yezhov ordered the secret police to look through Moscow phone books for Polish names because they were running out of suspects. So they arrested people according to the last name, you know.
But as I showed, the let's say initial idea was that Polish nationalists were to blame for the great famine.
For the famine. So they were looking for a scapegoat, but they couldn't put anybody on trial, because if you put the saboteurs on trial, then you vent it openly, and then the world finds out about the famine, which never took place. So you have to shoot him anyway, right? And you do it administratively.
But this was the second thought.
That
But
was the
first thought was to organize this trial.
Organize a show trial, but then wait a minute, then we would have to talk about the famine that never took place.
Thank you.
Remember, it's always deception, always a deception operation.
This may be a partial answer to the previous question, at least as a pretext for Stalin to do what he did. Several years ago, Timothy Snyder spoke at the Wilson Center based on his work in Polish archives, where he found records of an attempt, an operation in the 1920s, where the Polish government tried to infiltrate people into Ukraine.
Yeah.
It was singularly unsuccessful. Most of these people were captured within a few hundred yards of crossing the frontier and killed. And by the time of the Non-Aggression Pact of 1932, it had been abandoned. But one wonders whether this, given Stalin's well-known paranoia, whether this could have pushed him over the edge and made what was a very feeble operation look more formidable to him than it was.
The border between Poland and Soviet Union up to 1931 was, let's say, quite open.
Yeah.
Not only for for example, for smugglers, because when the border was set up, it was in some places even divided, for example, the village into parts. So it was very artificial, and it happened that some part of family lived in Poland and the other part in Soviet Union, and they have some contact. But I found in this archive in Chernihiv the documents concerning Polish agents in Ukraine, prepared by the Polish communist rule in 1957, because the Soviets started the process of rehabilitation of all the enemies of the people, and they found out then that there are big group of Poles executed during the Great Terror, and they asked Polish authorities,
Communist secret police.
were there really so many Polish agents? And I can show it, this document. This is the first page. It's in Polish, and they are listing. They are listing. Those are the agents, This is the place which is called Ku, and collaborators of the placówka Ku, jak to powiedzieć?
Of intelligence cell.
Intelligence cell Ku, and there you have about 30 persons with 31 persons.
31 persons.
With the remark that one of them was probably a fraud, that he was stealing something
Yeah, he was just taking money
for nothing.
Stalin remembered everything, and sure, everything stoked his paranoia, but only when he felt like it. Because he forgave Yezhov, even though he berated Yezhov periodically. He used to drink with Konar. I remember that. And he'd say that for 7 years and nothing happened, and finally he shot Yezhov. So it was very instrumental. His paranoia acted up when it needed to act up.
And what is also interesting in these documents, that the last paragraph,
Not 80,000 people, by the way, but 31.
yes,
Not
and the
80,000, but 31.
31 for 10 years,
Yeah.
and the last paragraph is concerning this Skarbek, this chief of Polish military organization, which never alleged,
Which
yes,
never existed.
yes, and there is written that they have some information about his connection with Dwójka. It means that they have some wide intelligence that there was a process of Skarbek in Soviet Union, but he was not listed on Polish list as agent because he wasn't Polish agent.
No, it was all fake, basically.
In your research, were you able to determine when those people were arrested and how they died and where they were buried?
Yes, of course, I have full information.
Okay, so what was the time period when they were arrested? What years?
I have for every man, this is a different time.
In 1930s? Was it?
Oh, 37.
37 and 38, the bulk of it, but also some were arrested a little bit before, in 1936, and also after the official finish of anti-Polish operation, there is still some kind of follow-up. Mop-up, yes.
Tell the story about the dude in the grave, the one who emerged from the grave.
But it's not concerned with the document.
Well, no, the gentleman is interested. Found one instance where the NKVD.
Yes, but
conducted an
but this
execution.
document wasn't found by me,
No.
but it was in Sakhalin. It was found in Sakhalin.
Okay.
Mhm.
So, in one instance, the NKVD mass murdered a bunch of prisoners, and one of them survived, waited until the night, and crawled out of the grave, and then roamed around the Soviet Union for a year or two.
No, he was actually thinking what to do next, and
He survived.
he survived, but it was in the woods.
Yes.
So
Crawled
he
down
was trying to wash himself, and he went to the first village, and komsomolcy
Communist Jews.
catched him and took him back to the NKVD. And the documents which was found in Sakhalin, it was he testified what happened,
and then they shot him.
why he was alive.
But we have the process. We have the whole execution.
Yes,
in writing.
and the question was how it was. You were put to the car, yes.
Yeah.
With whom? He was saying with whom.
With
And
the
what
other
happened next? I was taken away, and then someone shot, and then I lost my conscience. And after some hours, consciousness, and after some hours I was awaking slowly, yes. And after that I was crawling out of the grave, and after that I was going through the woods. I was trying to wash myself, and then I met those komsomolcy, and then we met again.
Yeah. You know, Sakhalin is on the opposite side. It's quite a trip.
But he was also a Pole,
Yeah,
from
he
Sakhalin,
was-
from Harbin,
Yeah,
probably.
He was a part of the Harbin operation.
No, a Polish, but this guy was
In
from
Harbin.
Harbin.
Oh, okay.
You know, he was
So he was
living
still
for.
Polish. Okay.
Mhm.
There are very many operations in once, and the Polish and the anti-Polish operation of the NKVD was the most massive one. Anyway, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll get